Mr. Speaker, since Russia's invasion of Ukraine, the world has changed, socially, economically, and the political landscape. Putin's war has killed thousands of Ukrainians, innocent citizens, and displaced millions who have struggled to get food and resources in this region. I spoke on the floor back in April after the attacks in Bucha, which I visited, and labeled President Putin for what he is, a war criminal. As Russia continues to this unprovoked attack on Ukraine, we must continue to stand strong and united against him. I traveled to Kiev, Ukraine's capital city, as a part of a Yalta European Strategy Conference recently. As one of the only members of Congress to have actually stayed overnight, spent a couple days, I witnessed the 24-hour cycle of capital city finding energy, once again, revitalizing itself through its day-to-day routines. I saw parts of the city where Russia's tanks entered the suburbs and killed innocent civilians, destroying homes, apartments, and schools, as well as children. Mass graves with over 166 individuals. But even through this tragedy, Ukraine has remained resilient, and Kiev returns to life. I felt relatively safe as I walked the streets in the central city. Looking back to where the city was 6 months ago, it's a reminder to me on how precious all of our freedoms are. As I met Ukrainians across the capital, it was inspiring to see their hope for better days that are coming and that Ukraine will prevail. During my visit, we met with NATO allies and many of the panel sessions that we had on how we will continue our support for Ukraine amidst Russia's brutal war that was unprovoked. Critically, we discussed matters related to Ukraine's defense, its economy recovery plans, and humanitarian aid as it prevails, continuing with Russia's countless attacks. Strong economic security is critical to rebuilding Ukraine and preserving its sovereignty. That's what we must do after the war. We saw Ukrainian armed forces execute one of the most pivotal 48-hour counteroffensives during the past 6 months, and it continues. The liberation of Izum and territory to the north of Kharkiv is one of the countless displays of bravery and sacrifice that has come to define Ukraine's fight. Ukraine is putting up a stronger fight than Russia was anticipating through strength, unity, and love of country, and Ukraine will prevail. But today we heard that Putin is enlarging his forces by 300,000, and it's inferring that everything is on the table. We must call his bluff. Congress and President Biden have provided significant support to Ukraine since the beginning of the war, and it's made a difference on a bipartisan basis, and we must continue that when we pass the continuing resolution later in the next week. Ukraine has been able to strengthen its defense systems, bolster its refugee services, and tackle food insecurity. Millions of tons of grain are coming out of Odessa through the agreement that was reached through Turkey and the UN. However, challenges remain and the war yet has not been won. We, the United States, with our NATO allies, must continue to unite against Vladimir Putin and provide Ukraine with the tools to defend itself and to protect its sovereignty from this brutal invasion. As we craft upcoming continuing resolution, we must continue additional funding. This is a pivotal moment in our history. Our actions today will determine the future of the 21st century. The world has changed in the last 8 months. Future generations will look back in history and judge us if we made more good decisions than poor decisions to preserve their rights and their liberties. We must not let Putin win. Democracy must prevail. This is the test of our time and our generation among our NATO allies and here in America to stand up for liberty and democracy.